Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and I picked a few of the different auctions from the recent Hakes auction batch from this May session, and there were mint on cards, baggies, loose graded, all kinds of good stuff. I just kind of picked a smattering of items that I thought were interesting. In general, the prices were kind of middling. I didn't see anything that was too crazy. There were a few that surprised me on the upper end as well as the lower end. As is always with Hakes, you never know what exactly people are going to go after. The one item I really wanted, of course, went way too expensive for me, so I'll show you that one. But I did have some luck. I hope you guys did as well. As always, thanks to my Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/actionfiguregrader is where you can go to sign up. All of the prices I'm going to be quoting include the 18% buyer's premium that Hakes charges on the winning bid. And as a side note, if you pay by check, you can avoid 3% of that 18%. It drops down to 15%. If you pay by credit card, they charge you the transaction fees for the credit card, so that goes up to 18%. All right, so let's take a look. And the first one was interesting. This was kind of the early bird kit, but none of the figures were still inside the baggie. It did include the double telescoping saber, Luke, all the paperwork, the certificate box, all the little inner tray, all that good stuff. So this is kind of a nice poor man's version of the early bird kit. If you don't particularly have to have one untouched and the bags are still sealed, that kind of thing. So you can put this in like a sliding acrylic case, and you could have the earliest example of the action figures from the Kenner Star Wars line. This one sold for $38.94, which is probably about fair, would be my guess. High grade examples, like AFA graded examples, they can go for $10,000, $15,000, if not more. So this again is not gradable. This is just a kind of a poor man's kit that you would slide into an acrylic case and be happy with that. So that seems to be about right. It was kind of right between the value code of $1,000 to $5,000, kind of a big range there, but it kind of fell towards the upper end of that range. Here was an interesting one, and this one actually went a little higher than I expected. This is the 12 back A Vinyl Cape Jawa. Obviously, a very desirable mint on card figure. The cape had a lot of staining on it that you can see, and this is something we've talked about in past videos, where the cape does get stained sometimes for these vinyl capes. And this one was graded AFA 75, and so this grade happened after the staining to the cape is my guess. Card 80, blister 80, figure 75. So it's kind of a appropriately graded item. 75 overall because of that cape stainings. Archival case. Now this one, the value code was $5,000 to $10,000. I was thinking it was definitely not going to hit $10,000 because of the cape staining, but for whatever reason, it still went at $11,000, and I don't remember where the last one sold. That was like an AFA 80 or 85 from 1 or 2 sessions ago, but there is also another one on Hakes, on Heritage that we'll cover probably in early June. But, to me, I thought because of the staining to the cape and the fact that it could get worse over time, I thought for sure this would sell around $7,000 or $8,000. That was kind of my top end number. But it blew past that number. 11,053 was the final number. 20 back A Sand People AFA 80, that sold for $14.92. It was a punched example. Again, probably a little surprised it went that high, just given that it was punched. I was thinking probably closer to $1,200, but it was certainly a nice example. I could not see any staining to the cape on this one, which does happen with the Sand People in addition to the Vinyl Cape Jawa. But it did sell at $14.92, which again, I was a little surprised by. Usually AFA 80s and punched examples and those items with price stickers, those tend to go a little lower on Hakes for whatever reason. But this 20 back A, offerless, it's certainly nice, but it's more than I would have been willing to pay personally. 12 back B Stormtrooper AFA 80, that one went for $13.37. Unpunched example. Clear blister, straight 80s for the sub score. This is one where I actually thought it was pretty fair. I mean, to get a 12 back B Stormtrooper, value code was $1,000 to $2,000. I didn't think it would hit $2,000, but I was thinking more like $1,500 to $1,600 pretty easily for a 12 back B. And, I don't track these close enough, but for me, this was a better deal than the Tusken Raider. And I don't know anything about relative to how difficult it is to find that 20 back A Tusken Raider versus a 12 back B Stormtrooper. You could also make an argument that the blister, it looks a little dirty maybe. If you look at the close-ups of the blister, you could make an argument that it could be turning yellow, maybe. It looks a little yellow to me. That's just me. But still, $13.37, a really nice deal in my opinion. Another interesting one was this AFA 85 Plus dark brown-haired Luke Farm Boy, Hong Kong COO. So this is the dark brown one we cover all the time that showed up on ESB card backs as well as the 48 back transition card Return of the Jedi. Now, it was graded AFA 85 Plus, but in my opinion, the torso looks like it is starting to yellow. And it was just graded in August 2020, according to my buddy Jason. He looked it up on the population report for AFA. But in my opinion, it looks a little yellow to me. It could be reflections in the lighting, whatever. The value code was 400 to 700. It sold at 961, which I thought 700 was too low for this particular variant. It's a very, very tough variant to find in high grade. And I told Jason, I was like, man, whatever. Whether it's yellow or not, it's still a really hot item to get an AFA 85 Plus. It's probably, if not the highest on the census, it's got to be one of the highest on the population report. Next up, I did pick up this one. This was a CAS 85 SWC baggie for Walrus Man, and it went fairly cheap, and I went a little bit nuts on the baggies in this batch, and I wasn't planning on buying anything, but I just thought because this one went so low, the value code was 200 to 400. I paid 266 on this one, which that's about what they can go for ungraded, and I tend to prefer CAS's grading cases for baggies versus AFA. I like UKGs the best, but you just never see those on Hakes. So this CAS 85 baggie for Walrus Man looked really clean, and so I went ahead and picked that one up, as well as this one, which was a CAS 80 SWC baggie for Hammerhead. And I bid on these after the item I really wanted had gone too high, and everything else that was kind of on my watch list had already closed by the time I was done bickering with the other person that wanted the item, which I'll show you in a second. And these were two of the only items left on my watch list that I thought were worth buying. And I have two perfect spots on my shelf next to my Hammerhead and Walrus Man focus where these two would fit perfectly. So CAS 80 SWC baggie for Walrus Man. I did pay $266 on that one. I didn't get this one. It had already closed. Otherwise, I probably would have bid on it. This was a CAS 85 Hoth Stormtrooper. That sold for $194. Good deal there, I thought. I did pick up also a CAS 80 Cloud Car Pilot baggie. I think I paid about $188, somewhere in that ballpark, $190. So those were the three baggies that I picked up: Walrus Man, Hammerhead, and the Cloud Car Pilot. Here was an ungraded example of the Boba Fett mail-away baggie. It included the box as well as all the paperwork. So, this one is gradable, and it just had not been graded yet. The value code was 700 to 1,000. It sold for $13.57, which to me, $1,000 way too low for 100% complete Boba Fett. It's easy to find the baggie, fairly easy to find the paperwork, but it's really hard to find the box. And this one did have writing on the box, unfortunately, but so that'll affect the grading. But I think that it should still grade, in my opinion. It'll just probably get lowered because of the writing on the box. But $13.57 is a very fair number, in my opinion, for what that was. Next up was a 20 back G Hammerhead, unpunched, no price sticker. Some of their items were graded, some of them were ungraded. I thought this one was a very nice example. I didn't look to see closely on this one. It was not something I was really focused on, but it was ungraded. There were some with color touch that were noted. This one had some light scuffing to it, but this one sold for $354. I think it gets the 80 grade. I thought that was a really good deal. That came in even below the value code of 400 to 700. I would have guessed $500 plus easily on that one. Great deal. Now here is one that is color touch. So this one says scattered color touch-ups at corner and to edges of card. This one is the 21 back A Boba Fett. The value code was 700 to 1,000. The winning bid was $32.45. So even with color touch, people were willing to pay big money for this one. It went for over 3 times the high end of the value code. I don't think I'd pay that personally, but versus paying for an AFA graded example, you're going to be paying a lot more than $32.45. So I understand why somebody was willing to pay that if they just wanted to fill a hole in their collection and were not particularly bothered about having color touch on the card. But that one did sell for big money. Next up was a CAS 80 Plus Blue Snaggletooth, that one sold for $674, so right at the very low end of the value code. Here was the one that went for a lot higher than I was expecting. This one was the 21 back Darth Vader, unpunched, no price sticker, probably in about 75 grade, maybe low 80 grade, but it had the offer extension sticker on the back for Bosk, which always means that those go for a lot of money. At the $100 to $200 code, I don't know where they were getting that number from. That was way too low. I was thinking like 1,000, maybe 1,500, somewhere in that ballpark. It sold for $2,111. So again, it's because it's got that rare extension sticker on the back. It's also an ESB Vader clear blister, so you're going to pay a lot of money for it, but very nice. Here was a 32A Princess Leia AFA 80. That one sold for $1,100, probably about right. I was thinking $1,100 to $1,200. It's a punched example, AFA 80, so I thought that was a very fair number. CAS 80 47 back Cloud Car Pilot clear blister, again a punched example price sticker. That one sold for $389, towards the upper end of the value code, but you know, again, it's a pretty nice example and worth every penny of $400 in my opinion. All right, here's the one that I bid on, but I could not win. The value code was $200 to $400, and I went back and forth with some buyer, and I finally backed off, but it sold for $746, including the buyer's premium. This was a CAS, or no, it was not graded. It was not graded. It was a 48 back C Bosk, but it also did have light ink damage on the back, if I can get a close-up here. It was not disclosed, and maybe they just didn't see it, but right around in here by the free Admiral Akbar, you can see very clearly that it has ink marks on the back, for check marks. And I don't know why they were there, but it's like 1 or 2, 3, 4. It looks like 4 different ink marks that where someone had written in pen. And so, you know, it is gradable. You know, I talked to Chris Whitlock, one of the owners at CAS. He did say that they would ding you for it, but it is gradable because it's not considered color touch-up. It's just random ink marks on it. But I couldn't justify going higher than about $750. So I went back and forth like 5 times with some other bidder, and I finally backed off and let him have it. It's one I would like to have for my collection because it's one of the few Bosk ESB mocks I don't have. I don't have this one or the 45 back or the 47 back. But I don't know. To me, it was kind of about as max as I could go, given that it did have, you know, ink marks on the back of the card back. This is one I did win. I paid $425 for it after the buyer's premium. That is the 21B on the same 48 back C. This one was punched with 2 price stickers, clear blister. I think it'll probably get an 80 grade. We'll see. I'll be sending that one in along with a double stem Palatoy 45 back Dengar that I picked up in an international auction. So once the 2 of these arrive, I'll probably send them in to either AFA or CAS to be graded. But I think it'll get the 80 grade. And, I was kind of missing an ESB 21B because I sold my 45 back example a while back when I was trying to put together some funds for a big comic book. So it's nice to get one back, and so we'll see where it grades, but I'm guessing 75 plus or 80 would be the grade on that one, and I paid $425 for that one, so there you go. Those are the items I got. I got the 21B Medical Droid and then 3 graded baggies. Next up, I thought this was a good deal. It had unfortunately already closed by the time my bidding war ended with the 48C Bosk, so I couldn't bid on this one, although I probably would have if it was still available. This is the Tri-Logo A-Wing Pilot, AFA 80. That sold for $515. I would have been willing to go higher, but unfortunately it did close before I had a chance to bid on it. Next up, 77 back A Leia, just faint yellowing. It was labeled as yellowed blister, but it's really a pretty clear blister. I don't see the yellowing at all to it. Maybe the inner tray had some yellowing, but it was a clear blister otherwise. That one sold for $563. You'll remember the AFA 85 clear blister labeled AFA example for this same figure went for over, I don't remember what the number was, but it was like $2,800. Is that right? It was something crazy like that. But this one was yellow blister. I would argue that this was the better deal because I think it's just the inner tray that had yellowed. It looks to me like it's got a clear blister on the outer blister. So that was a much better deal, much better use of your money, in my opinion. I think you have a better chance of getting your money out of it on this one versus that other one that sold a session or 2 ago. Here was a 77A Chewbacca with the alternate image Rockstar image there. Rockstar Chewbacca. AFA 80, clear blister, and unpunched, no price sticker. That one sold for $811. I had a buddy that was watching this one, not sure if he bought it or not, but he asked me where I thought it would go. I said about $800, so I was pretty close on that one. Next up was a Power of the Force Imperial Gunner yellow blister, very light yellowing to it, but this was the Imperial Gunner graded AFA 80. That one sold for $499. Really good deal there. It was a punched example, which maybe held the price down a little bit, but that's a great deal if you ask me. So finally, I had obviously one of the holy grails in this batch. This was an unpunched Kenner Canada Power of the Force Yak Face. This one was an AFA 60. And if you remember, we saw one on eBay that was an AFA 85 that sold at auction, and it went for like $8,000, $8,000 or $9,000, somewhere in that ballpark. This one was an AFA 60 and sold for $7,140. So if you remember in that video, I said, hey, this seller picked the wrong format to sell his AFA 85 Power of the Force Kenner Canada Yak Face. Very high grade example, and you know this explains why. An AFA 60 sold for about $1,000 or $1,500 less than what he sold his for on AFA and on eBay, and his was an AFA 85. So it does matter when you have those rare items which format you take, because this is the kind of format that people with the big bucks are going to be looking at. They're not scrolling through eBay. They're not scrolling through eBay. And I think for something that expensive and that high of a grade, that rare, you got to use the right format for it. And Heritage or Hakes would be the way to go for something like that. Anyway, I hope you found something useful in this video in terms of price formats or recent prices. And I hope that you guys were able to pick up something on this last Hakes auction. I'm excited to get my items in at some point, and I'm sure I'll show them in a future video on the channel. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.